I think having only read the title, you already know what I mean. Like, if you look at the latest batch of rookies we got in 23, you'll agree that most of these lads are not going to be here for a long time. The only reason I'm not saying all of them is because Piastri's a fucking stone cold boss, innit? Unlike some other lads. And what it really leads to is that teams become less and less willing to risk it for the biscuit and start onboarding a bunch of fresh meat onto the sport. Simply because it's very fucking likely they'll be kicked to the curb within a season. Sometimes they don't even make it past the summer break. But then again, Nicky was a bit of a special boy, wasn't he?
Wow. Thank you very much.
Anyways, what I've decided to do today is understand why so many of our beloved F1 rookies get flung out before they're able to spread their wings and turn into a beautiful butterfly. And instead get eaten up by the other vermin looking for that top spot. It's savage out there in the real world. Brutal, mate. Having a look at the latest chaps who bit the bullet and were flung out of the sport, what is quite noticeable is simply the obvious. They just weren't good enough, were they? I mean, it's become pretty clear why De Vries was sacked by simply looking at the driver standings in 23. While his teammate amassed 17 points, Nicky, my boy, was sitting on a nice fat 0 by halftime. And then, as we all know, he was benched and is now whizzing around in one of those toasters in Formula E. That's gotta hurt. But whatever, it is no surprise that some drivers are good and some are complete arse. What does surprise me is that the arse drivers do make it to F1. If you didn't know, there are a lot of hoops one has to go through to make it to the big boy league. You have to be successful in the smaller cars, enough to stand out among the rest of the kids on the playground, and have one of the big team principals take a particular liking in you, enough to be willing to pay you $1 million salary, plus all the expenses of private jets, champagne, hotel chips, and all. It adds up, you know. So they really have to be committed to you in order to get you into the sport. Well, unsurprisingly, when they take on 3 different rookies in the same year, not all of them could be the F2 champion that season. Some of them are going to be the runner-up, or just a good prospect from a different league. So something other than immediate performance must convince you to get the boy in. Well, here comes the annoying part of the sport. A lot of the kids, for one reason or another, have a lot of hype surrounding them. And hype sells tickets. Whether that has to do with your performance in particular, your record of the season, or you might just be the son of a legendary driver and it would sell a hell of a lot of merch if you were suddenly drafted. Or, for example, you might be born in the USA and automatically considered as the only person the Americans are willing to buy a flag of, which again sells merch. Or it might just be that your daddy owns an oil company and is willing to put the company's logo on his son's car for a very pretty penny. I think you're starting to get my point. Another important factor to consider is the starting team. Believe it or not, it matters a lot which team you join in the beginning. In fact, it seems you have a hell of a better chance to stick around if you don't agree to join a Williams or a Haas as your initial pick and try and hold out for a better offer. Of course, nobody knows if you're ever going to get a better offer, but at least you won't be throwing away your only chance at making your daddy proud. In fact, there have only been a few who survived being in the shit teams, and one of them started in a really good one and then was demoted to a Williams. And the other one had to make a pitch deck to the owner of one of the bigger teams to get his seat. Now he's essentially become the man's pet and was quickly promoted from a regular tractor to a Mercedes one. It's a hell of a fucking story. I think after Georgia retires, he has to write a book about how to get into F1, then get into the better team in F1, for that team to start sucking ass for the next 3 seasons and eat garbage just the same as you did in the other team. I'd buy that book. And it's also becoming a hell of a lot more competitive out there. And I'm not talking here about the usual progression in drivers and blah blah blah. No, in fact I'd say if you put the current boys in the 1970s car, they'd probably break a few ribs the first time they hit a wall. What I'm meaning to say is, there's a lot more people gunning for the same amount of seats now. I mean, if before drivers sort of fucked off and retired when they hit 30s to, have some functionality in their body until they hit 50, now some of them are pushing 40s and haven't left the sport. Some of them have gone away and now come back in their late 30s. Like, how is a young brat that hasn't stepped foot in an F1 car supposed to compete with a Daniel Ricciardo or Fernando Alonso that have won multiple Grand Prix before? They can't. So instead of getting new blood in and giving them time to develop, it's a hell of a lot easier for a team to replace them with an old but loved pensioner. Now, for the record, I'm not defending De Vries here. He was shit. Should have been replaced after this first race. You know, it's really tough being an F1 prospect these days. You've got to really work hard, driving a race car around for a living, flying to racetracks in business, not private, having only one assistant and one personal coach until you might finally get a multi-million-dollar salary and at least a year to pretend you're Brad Pitt, you know, signing autographs, traveling the world and just being an absolute fucking rock star. And then if you fail, you'll be forced to go and work at your daddy's company in a top corporate job you don't deserve. It's fucking tough, man. I really feel bad for them. It's not a life worth living.